All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are at. So welcome to the Enterprise Architecture Q&A, question and answers. So you can ask any question on enterprise architecture, and I will try to answer those questions. So what I would suggest is your first question, put it on the chat. If you have any follow-up question, probably you can unmute yourself and then ask the question. Otherwise, I would prefer you to put the questions in the chat, okay, so that there won't be any disturbance. So if you keep talking again, there will be a lot of disturbance, okay? So let's see if you have any questions. Can you please put your questions in the chat? Okay. What's an year role in IT operations? So Jenny, I'm thinking like you're asking about IT operations in general, which means it includes the development, operations, and development, testing, QA, operations, everything, right? So EA is a key component or a discipline, if you will, to to bind all these together, right? So how IT operations can be done smoothly, right? So meaning, so we have, so how do we make sure that the business has captured all the requirements or not, right? And how do we communicate those the requirements to the development, and whether the development has done or implemented all the requirements or not, and then how the the once the development is done, whether the testing has done properly or not, right? And once the testing everything is done, did we inform the operations or not, right? The for the deployment, and so EA establishes the touch points between these various disciplines and make sure that the whole IT operations is smooth. So that's the main role of an EA, to make sure that the IT operations are done smoothly, without any interruptions, without any delays, right? So establishing those touch points and defining those processes and all that. So that's the role of an EA in the enterprise architecture and in the IT operations. So next question, Supriya, she has asked, can you please explain about the enterprise architecture role in a digital transformation? That's a very good question. So now, digital transformation is a big transformation, meaning like so it's not an initiative that can be done in 6 months or 1 year. So it takes several years to transform any enterprise into a digital enterprise. So there are many things that EA can do in this digital transformation. So first of all, when you have such a big transformation, you need to have a clear mission vision, right? So EA starts with establishing that clear mission for that digital transformation, mission vision, okay? And then identifies the required, so what services you need to, digitize, right? So again, that can be done in many ways. So you can look at your business processes and identify those business digital services, or there are many ways that you can identify a digital service, right? So whether you can look at your business functions or business services and see how you can turn them into a digital service, right? So EA basically identifies the digital services that needs to be implemented, and then EA establishes those processes, how that service can be implemented, right? So how the development can be done, right? So basically, EA also can use concepts like design thinking, right, to identify the digital services. And you can use the DevOps kind of concepts to implement, quickly and deploy it, right, without any interruptions. So EA can, you know, can handhold the whole organization to this for this digital transformation. So they can not only defining the vision, mission, developing the services, and how the organization can digitally transform, right? So measuring the success of that digital transformation can also be done by the EA, by the enterprise architecture. Okay. And let's see if you have any other questions. And Andrew has mentioned, how do you address security and compliance considerations in enterprise architecture? So there are several security considerations, and especially from a compliance perspective, there are several standards like SOC 2, right, or ISO 27001, or the NIST, the federal, the government NIST standards, right? So there are several standards or security compliance standards in the industry. So making sure that all the organizations, right, your organization is complying to those security standards or not is one of the primary responsibility of the enterprise architect. So there will be an enterprise security architect who will be responsible for establishing these standards or identifying the standards that the organization should comply with, and make sure that those compliance criteria is embedded in their planning, implementation, right, deployment. So in all aspects. So making sure that the organizations are compliant, right? Otherwise there will be a lot of implications, because let's take GDPR, right? Now, if you are not compliant with the GDPR, then you may incur some penalties, right? So to avoid those penalties and all, the enterprise security architect will make sure the organization is complying with all the security standards. Okay. Now let's look at one question from Karthik. So how do you address the challenges of legacy systems in the enterprise architecture? Okay, so now if your organization is running for several years, right? Let's say more than 10 years or so, there will be some legacy systems, right? So as an enterprise architect, you have to understand what legacy systems you have, right? So and legacy meaning it could be there for a while, but so again, you have to check whether the technology is obsolete or not, right? Or whether anyone is using those legacy systems or not, right? So if no one is using those legacy systems, probably that's a potential candidate to retire, right? So you can think of how we can retire that system. And let's say if some people are using that legacy system, but the technology is obsolete, then you have to think of how do we migrate that system to a new technology, right? So these are various analysis that you can do as an enterprise architect to identify how do we transform those legacy systems into modern systems, or whether we have to retire those systems, right? So those decisions can be taken. And of course, the business has to approve your suggestions, right? And then you can implement accordingly. Okay. All right. Now let's see one question here. What is EA? From a recent graduate perspective, right? So, well, enterprise architecture is a discipline, right, where you can, you strategize, right? So you come up with what the organization needs to accomplish, right, from a business perspective and from a technology perspective. Now, there are four domains from an enterprise architecture perspective: business, application, data, and technology. So for these four architectures, right? So enterprise architects, so from a business perspective, they identify the business goals, objectives, right? Functions, services, processes, capabilities, value streams, right? So these are all the things, many other things also there, right? So these are the important things that from a business perspective. And from a data perspective, you identify the data entities, what the organization needs. And from a application perspective, you identify what applications the organizations need. And from a technology perspective, you identify the technology infrastructure that you need to build these applications and data, right? Now, having said that, now from a graduate perspective, okay, so uh, like so this is a very vast topic, right? A discipline that can be, if you want to introduce that at a graduation level, I believe that it has to be a multi-year program, right? So first, the students has to understand how the organizations work, right? And how the IT work, right? And the relationship between the business and the IT, right? And so you have to build that, the competency, right, slowly over the years, so that they can understand these concepts, right? So usually it is the very experienced IT or a business professional will do the enterprise architecture. But if you have to introduce that at a graduate level, you have to do it, you know, gradually, so that the students can understand these concepts properly. Otherwise, it will be an overwhelming program. But definitely anything can be taught, but you have to give some time, and you have to gradually embed those the concepts to the into these the programs, educational programs. Okay. All right, let's look at any other question. Okay, so how does enterprise architecture contribute to the business agility? So that's a very good question. So earlier, enterprise architecture used to be only from a technology perspective. I think it's a few years back, like maybe 10 years back or so. But lately, we understood that from mid 2000s onwards, we understood that enterprise architecture is not just for technology, right? So we have to come from a business perspective to make sure that what we are doing is, accomplishing the goals and objectives as well. So, and now business agility means, how do we incorporate the changes, right? How do we react to the changes that are coming from a business perspective as well, not just from a technology perspective. And so for that, now the enterprise architects create a blueprint for the whole enterprise, right? So they identify, what are the business goals, objectives, and what functions or services are accomplishing that, right? So you create a big picture, a blueprint for the whole organization. Now, when you have a blueprint, it is easy to bring changes to the organization. And also, if there are any changes from anywhere, let's say a business goal has changed, right? Now you know what components down below, right? So from a business perspective or from a application, from an IT perspective, right? What components are impacted by that change, right? So then you can accommodate that change very easily. So having that blueprint, right, helps the organization to achieve their business agility, right? So of course, there are many other things that EA can do to bring the business agility, but at a high level, so creating that blueprint, knowing the whole organization, how these various parts of the organization are connected to each other, right? And any identifying any change, right? And look at what are impacted and accommodating those changes brings the business agility within the organization. Okay. All right. Let me see, Samir. So I'm very interested in this field, but I don't have much knowledge to know from where to start and where the step to master to my knowledge. So what about TOGAF? Which course? Hold on one second. Which course would you recommend? Okay, so that's a good question. So Samir, I'm believing that you are kind of an IT architect or a solution architect, something around like that, right? Maybe in the development side or operation side, somewhere around that. Now, you want to get into the enterprise architecture. Of course, the knowledge is a prerequisite, right? To get into any new area, the knowledge is a prerequisite because the enterprise architecture is a quite different discipline by itself when compared to general IT, right? So if you are in a general IT, probably you are developing some systems, right? Or doing something around one system mostly, right? So some people may be working on different systems as well, but enterprise architecture is so you are looking at the whole organization, right? And identifying what you need from a business perspective, data, application, and technology perspective, right? So your perspective has to change from doing one thing to various things, right? So the analogy that I give usually in my trainings is the city planning, right? So if you are an IT person, basically you are developing one system or sorry, if you are, so let's take a city, right? So in a city there are multiple buildings, right? Multiple things, right? So if you are building a building, it's like building one IT system, right, within the organization, right? Now if you are a city planner, you are not building one building, you are planning the whole city itself, right? So enterprise architect role is analogous to a city planner. So which means you are not building one system, you are planning the whole systems, like what all we need for the whole organization, and also identify the interconnections between the systems, how the systems can be integrated, multiple things, right? So you have to be like a city planner rather than a building architect, right? So for that, you need some knowledge, you need some frameworks, right? Of course, TOGAF is the most famous the framework in the industry, almost an international standard. So you can start with TOGAF, right? So you can gain the concepts of TOGAF. But of course, that is a stepping stone, right? So knowing TOGAF is a stepping stone. After that, you have to know many things, right? You have to read a lot of things, and then see how your organization is working, right? And how much enterprise architecture is done within your organization, and slowly learn how the enterprise architecture is done, right? Practically, then when you get into an enterprise architect role, you will definitely be successful. Okay, so hope that answers your question. If you have any follow-up question, please let me know. I can answer better. Okay. So, Michael, what methodologies or frameworks have you used in enterprise architecture projects like TOGAF, Zachman, and what are their benefits? So we had used several frameworks. Of course, TOGAF is a primary framework, but we had used Zachman, and there are some industry frameworks like BIAN, Banking Industry Architecture Network. There is one called Telecom. Telecom has something called frameworks. There are some government frameworks like FIAF and all, right? So we had used several frameworks. Each one has its own, pros and cons. But of course, TOGAF incorporates all the best practices from all the frameworks. So I would say, TOGAF is the most versatile framework. But having said that, there is no harm in mixing and matching any framework that is available in the industry. And of course, if you are doing for your organization, right? If you are developing a framework for your organization, that would be a customized version of a TOGAF or a mix of some few frameworks as well. So you have to decide. You have to come up with your own framework for your organization to be successful. So these are all industry frameworks like TOGAF, Zachman, and all. They are generic frameworks, right? So you cannot apply those frameworks as such for your organization. So you have to customize the frameworks to fit your organization, and that's when you can reap the benefit, right? So doing just the TOGAF as it is will not give you any bit. In fact, you will it will be overwhelming for you, and you will be lost in implementing the whole framework. So that's why you have to come up with a customized framework to fit for your organization. Then you will be successful. Okay. All right, and benefits of EA to change our organization. So what all I said before, right, will holds good for this question. So basically, the whole purpose of enterprise architecture is to make sure that the organization addresses its business drivers, technology drivers, right? Make sure that the organization achieves its business goals and objectives, right? And of course, aligning how IT can be aligned to the business or not, right? So whether your IT is helping you to achieve those business goals and objectives or not. So that's the main purpose of the EA. So so without an EA, like, so everyone, like, so be it now, it's every business unit will be working on their own. Every individual will be working on their own. There should be something to tie the organization together and make sure that we are all, heading in the right direction, right? So that's the main purpose of the enterprise architecture. Without that, we cannot achieve anything in the organization, right? So everyone will be running in their own direction, and you don't see much benefit. Okay. All right. Now, okay. So Samir, I asked, I need suggestion for training institute Pearson. Pearson View is a certification body, right? It's not a training institute, it's a certification body, or it's a body that conducts the exam, right? So of course, the certification body is the open group. And, we do the, training on TOGAF, SNA Technologies. So if you give your email ID, probably we can reach you out and then, we can give you the information that you need for the training and all. Okay. So if anyone wants any follow-up, please, give your email ID. So you can send it either privately to me. I can, let my team follow up with you for any questions. Okay. So, yeah, thank you. And so Mamata has a question. So how do you address the challenges of legacy system? I think I just answered this question. So when you have a legacy system, right? Now you can decide, what kind of legacy system is it, right? So whether the technology is obsolete or not, whether it is used by anyone within the organization or not, or whether it is meeting the business goals, objectives or not. Because when we had developed that system, we might have had some business goals and objectives, right? And it is developed for that purpose, right? But now the organization might have changed over the years. Now your goals and objectives might have changed. Now, so that's why we have to look at whether that that system, legacy system, is still useful or not, right? So if not useful, better retire that one, right? So you can achieve some cost efficiency by retiring that legacy system. If it is useful, right? If the organization still needs that system, but it is on a obsolete technology, then you have to look at how that system can be modernized, right? So as an enterprise architect, you have to do all these analysis and give good recommendation to the business so that the business can take right decisions at the right time. Okay, so that's the main purpose, main responsibility of the EA. Okay, all right. Okay, so Jenny has another question. Could you elaborate the difference between? Hold on one second. All right, difference between. I don't see further. Is there any message here? Okay, difference between enterprise architecture and business architecture. Okay, so as I said, enterprise architecture has four main domains, architecture domains. One is business architecture, second one is data, third application, and fourth is a technology architecture, right? So business architecture is a subdomain of enterprise architecture. Okay, so which means business architecture is part of enterprise architecture, and so everything starts from the business, right? So all the architectures that you do, right, the data, application, technology should be based on the business architecture. So that's why it is important to do the business architecture more in detail as much as possible, right, to the utmost level of granularity, so that all the other domains, right, the data, application, and technology can be done with much ease. Okay, so that is very important, right? So now business architecture contains, so it starts with identifying your drivers, right? The business drivers, and then identifying your business goals, objectives, right? And then defining the functions, services, processes, right? Business capabilities, and then the business capabilities, the value streams, mapping these value streams to the capabilities, right? So these are all the various artifacts that you will create from a business architecture perspective, right? And of course, once the business architecture is done, then you identify your data entities, the application services that you need, and the technology infrastructure, the software, hardware, and communication infrastructure. So then you can tie all these things together, right? So once you have your business architecture, now how you tie your IT, right? The applications, data, and technology to the business architecture, that will give you a full-fledged view of the whole enterprise architecture. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so what does governance? How does a governance play a role, right? What role does governance play in enterprise architecture? So governance, play a very good, it's a big, governance has a big role in enterprise architecture. Now, what is governance, right? So first of all, making sure that everyone is doing the right things within the organization or not is the governance, right? Now, when you say that, okay, so let's say you had come up with some business goals and objectives, right? And you had identified the business services and all, right? Now, does these business services that you had identified will accomplish the business goals or not, right? Or whether you had done, so you had identified some data and application, right? So what all you did, right, is helping you to accomplish the goals and objectives or not. So making sure that the organization is achieving those goals and objectives is the, the primary responsibility of the enterprise architecture, right? So that's one way. And then every organization establishes the standards, principles, right? The best practices, right? All these things. So making sure that the whole organization is following those standards, principles, right? Rules, guidelines, right? Best practices. So that's the responsibility of the governance, right? Now, now the challenge is, now earlier in a traditional organization, we did the governance through architecture boards, right? And it's a very traditional hierarchical architecture board. So you can have a board at an enterprise level, you can have a board at the business unit level, right? So the business unit level people are going to work with the development teams, operations, QA, and all to make sure that whatever has planned at the enterprise level is implemented at the business unit level, right? And the enterprise level board makes sure that the business units are doing properly, right? Whether they are meeting the business goals and objectives or not. Now, in a traditional governance structure, right? So these boards used to meet, right? So whenever there is a request from a project team, the board meets, right? And they review the projects and take a decision whether they are compliant with the enterprise architecture or not, right? Are there any non-compliance issues? And then, they will recommend, how can they fix those non-compliance, criteria and all. So it used to take a longer time because for a board to meet and take decisions, it used to take too long, and the project teams have to wait until the board takes a decision on those aspects. Now, so then we thought of, okay, this governance structure is not working. We need to do governance in a very lean manner, right? Now, some frameworks like SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, suggests that the governance can be done only at the system demo level, right? So for them, like, so once a system is developed, once a system is demoed during some iteration reviews or PA planning, right? So PA event, so that's when they check whatever has done is according to the plan or not, right? That is okay, but there are certain criteria, especially the compliance and all, which some even SAFe recommends that the compliance has to also be automated. But how much automation can be done is a bit of challenge, right? So there may be some manual intervention to be done, right? So of course the traditional phase-gated governance is not working for sure, right? And system demos may work just from an IT perspective, but there may be some other aspects that you may have to govern manually as well, right? I would say you need to be you need to take a right decision at the right time, right? So how do you take it, right? So that's the organization has to decide it. So what aspects has to go through a traditional governance, right? So what aspects has to be done in a very lean manner, right? From a system demo manner, right? So if the organization can decide that properly, right? So how how much governance is needed at what level, those organizations will be more successful rather than taking the organization in an extreme manner, right? So this, the traditional governance is kind of a, a little bit difficult, whereas the are time consuming, right? And there are, it becomes actually a bottleneck for that organization, right? Traditional organization. Now, traditional governance. Now, this system demo, it's very fast, right? You can, you are looking at the, software that is working, right? And, you can give a feedback whether that software is done according to the, the plan, the architecture and all. So that's quick and, that's very quick, right? So that governance is lean and fast, right? That's okay. But there may be other aspects, I think, which need some little bit of manual intervention. So if the organization can take a right decision, what type of governance is needed for what type of decisions, so those organizations will be more successful. So that's my take on it. Okay. All right. Now let me come up with okay, so what are the key components of the enterprise architecture framework? Now, the key components of enterprise architecture framework are all the architectures, right? Architecture domains like business, application, data, and technology. And there are some other cross domains as well, like security, integration, right? So these are all, the architecture domains. And the other components are governance is another key component, right? And then principles, standards, right? These are all other the key components. And then what else we have? I think, yeah, these are pretty much. So the architecture domains, right? Including the core domains and subdomains, governance, standards, principles. So these are the key components. Okay. All right. So what strategies do you employ to ensure ongoing alignment between the business and IT in enterprise architecture? Okay. So as I said before, right? If you look at enterprise architecture, enterprise architecture started in late 80s, right? So 87 was when first framework, enterprise architecture framework like Zachman framework has come out, right? So since then, from 87 or late 80s to till 2000, it was all technology, right? Even after 2000, I think till mid 2000s, it was all technology architecture, right? So we hadn't looked into the business architecture at all at that time. So because optimizing the technology, the infrastructure was the primary motto then, right? So when we did that, the enterprise architecture purely from a technology perspective, we reaped very less benefit, right? Maybe like 20% or so, right? 10 to 20%. Then we realized that we have to first understand the business and understand the enterprise architecture. Understand the business and architect the business before we embark on our optimization of the technology infrastructure, right? So then from mid 2000s onwards, so now we started to do the business architecture. I would say we just started, but still, even now, right? Many organizations lack business architecture, right? So they are still doing, very bare minimal business architecture and quickly jumping on to the other domains, business, application, and technology. So that's why we are still not able to reap more benefits from enterprise architecture, right? So if we had done the enterprise architecture from a business perspective more in detail, right? And then we do the other domains, then we can reap the more benefits, and there will be a better alignment between the business and the IT, right? So that's what is missing in most of the organizations. So doing the business architecture in a more detailed manner, right? So that's very important for any organization to align the business and IT, and also reap the benefit of the the business and IT. Okay. Okay. So how do you measure the success of an enterprise architecture initiative? Again, this trickle backs to the same question, right? So enterprise architecture should start from business, right? From the business goals and objectives. So if your architecture, right, if the all the other architectures, the business, the data, application, and technology are are helping you to reach your business goals and objectives, right? So that is how you can measure your enterprise architecture. Okay, so that is how. Uh, so measuring that. So you need to have metric, right? Aligning all these components together, right? From the business goals, objectives, right? Capabilities, functions, capabilities, services, right? And down to the data entities, applications, right? And aligning all these components together and see whether you're meeting your business goals and objectives is what so that's the main responsibility of the enterprise architect, to have that traceability and make sure that you are achieving your business goals and objectives. So that's how you can measure your enterprise architecture. Okay, any other questions from anyone? Okay, so can you explain the concept of architectural patterns and their role in the enterprise architecture? Now, first of all, what is a pattern? A pattern is a reusable solution for a recurring problem, right? So if you have a problem, right, and if you had solved that problem in a particular fashion, and if that problem reoccurs, right? And if you are applying that in the same pattern, right? So to solve that problem, so that's basically a pattern, is right. So it's a reusable solution for a recurring problem. Now, when you say architecture patterns, especially from an enterprise architecture perspective, that means it solves the business problem, right? So, for example, let's say you have supply chain management, right? So now you had defined, so to solve that supply chain management, let's say you came up with a solution, right? So these are the components that you need for supply chain management, right? So how do you get the quotes, right? How do you bid and all that? So whatever the systems that you need, right? What are the data that you need and the processes that you need? So let's say you had defined everything around that supply chain management, right? And now, so you had solved that one, and this whole thing that you had come up with for supply chain management works, right? So you know that is a reliable solution. So you define a pattern around that. So that, which means now whenever you want to implement supply chain management later, right? You can use the same pattern to solve that problem, right? So that is basically the architecture patterns, right, from an enterprise architecture perspective. Now, you can define several patterns for enterprise architecture, right, especially to solve the business problems, right? But unfortunately, this discipline is not a very much mature discipline, I would say, right? So not many patterns are identified, even though they are, identified, they are not well documented. So organizations are not able to apply these patterns, in a very systematic way, I would say, right? So that's my understanding. But hopefully, we can get more patterns, and we can apply those patterns to solve the business problems. But of course, every organization is unique, and they can take a pattern, maybe tweak it a little bit, to be applicable to their organization context. But having good patterns can fasten the architecture development, and from an architecture perspective, and even from a development, the implementation perspective. Okay, so that is the architecture patterns. Any other questions? Did I answer all the questions, or are there any questions that I left, that I missed? All right. So I believe that's a very good session. So I hope you all got some clarification on your questions. So if you have any other questions, feel free to reach us. Right. So yeah, definitely. So thank you all for joining this call. We will let you know probably in a couple of weeks. We will have another session, Q&A session. So we will let you know. We'll keep you posted on the next session. Hope you'll join the next session, and we can have a very good discussion. So thank you all. Thanks for your time.